Should you go watch it? Yes, you should. A family vacation turns into an apocalyptic nightmare after they lose communication with the outside world. Then two strangers show up at their door, adding further complications to a growing list of strange events. Now that's my own synopsis, and I personally would give this film an 8 out of 10. I just want to go ahead and get that out of the way. Great movie, great performances, interesting plot, and a polarizing ending. But we really got to talk about this one because I have a theory that it's secretly a horror film. My theory, a nocturnal theory, one could call it. But before we get into that, let's start from the top. So initially things start off like it's just a normal day in New York, or the outskirts of New York. But it feels a bit ominous, which the film does set the tone for sure, especially with the constant creepy ass music. And there's some ominous undertones happening as well. It's just the way the film is shot, it just feels a bit creepy. But during this time, we're introduced to the Sanford family, where we find out that the wife, Amanda, tells her husband, Clay, that she has planned a surprise trip for her family to rent a vacation home by the beach for the weekend. And Clay just seems like a very go-with-the-flow kind of guy, and he seems cool with the spontaneous vacation plans. Also, I wanted to quickly point out the artsy foreshadowing of the opening credit icons. Now, I don't think that this is something that most people will catch, because of course at this time, none of these things really mean anything if you haven't seen the film yet. But there's several icons of things that play a major role throughout the film, and I thought that was a pretty cool detail they added. So anyway, while they're driving out to this vacation house for a brief moment, it seems like there's an interesting broadcast on the radio. But they pull a quick Dawn of the Dead moment and flip away quickly to leave us viewers in the darkness about any events happening in the outside world. So there's 5 chapters throughout the film, and the first is titled The House, and it's basically all about the family checking out this dope-ass vacation home. Later, the wife Amanda does a grocery run where she sees Doomsday Kevin Bacon prepping for shit to go down. But of course, in this moment, he just looks like another paranoid doomsday prepper. Also, the soundtrack for this film is hilarious in moments, and for some reason, watching Julia Roberts bumping R&B is funny as hell to me. And I'm not sure why. I guess because I just picture her as being this flavorless, offbeat older white woman. Later that day, the Sanford family goes to the nearby beach to chill out, and their daughter Rose initially sees a huge oil ship in the distance, which isn't an immediate threat at first. But over time, the ship slowly gets closer as everyone is just chilling, and soon after it becomes clear that the ship isn't stopping and it's going to run onto shore, and they have to haul ass up out of there. They ask about what's happening on the way out, but no one really knows anything. Amanda tries to look it up later once they're back home, but realizes that she can't access the internet. Then Clay informs her that the TV also has no signal. Clay and Amanda also notice deer in the backyard, and Clay tells her that it's a good omen, which is kind of funny if you've already seen the film. Plus, there's an ominous zoom in on the deer that tells you right there that something ain't right about these damn deer. Anyway, the time passes, and once it's nighttime, there's a knock at the door, and we find out that it's allegedly the owner of the house, George Scott, and his daughter Ruth. They need a place to stay for the night because there was a blackout in the city. And although they live in the city, they live on the 14th floor, and George can't climb 14 flights because of his knee. That's right, there's a problem with his damn knee. I guess he may have taken an arrow to it. And if any of you guys have played Skyrim, you get that joke. Now in this moment, Amanda's got some obvious bigotry going on, and it's implied initially by when she asked George about it really being his house. She was basically in disbelief that a nice home like that could be owned by a black family. Black man.
I said your name is Toby. Kunta Kinte.
And Clay, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be fazed at all by their skin color. So let's just jump ahead a bit. They eventually agree to allow George and his daughter to stay in their in-law suite in their own house. George also offers to refund them 50% of what they paid to rent the house, and also during this time it's confirmed that nobody's cell phone has a signal, which honestly I feel is a fair deal. If there's an emergency situation and you want to stay in your own house that's currently being rented. So hey, Ruth's sassy attitude is definitely justified towards Amanda in my opinion, because Amanda is kind of being an asshole. Not kinda, she is being an asshole. And that staying in the house with people I don't know line was actually pretty funny. Especially the way Ethan Hawke looks at her. And the whole Nick part, I just kind of threw that in there for dramatic effect. She didn't almost say nigga. That's just me. But she might as well have said it the way she's acting, with the ER. So besides the oil ship, Doomsday Kevin Bacon, and the emergency news alert they see later on the TV, the biggest sign in chapter 1 of an ominous foreshadowing are the Jenga blocks that just mysteriously collapse, maybe signifying something else is about to mysteriously collapse. So we also discovered that George may have some inside information on what's happening in the world, but he's choosing to keep it to himself because he doesn't seem to be sure, or at least that's how it comes across in the film. And before the chapter closes out, we see one last image before the TV signal goes out completely. We see a map of the country and how everyone is under a cyber attack, and no one sees this because, well, everyone's in the bed. And this is just a heads up, if you haven't seen the film yet and you're just watching this recap, video, theory, whatever, well, there's a lot of moments like this throughout the film. A lot of near misses where characters could have gotten a little more information or could have seen something that could have, given them some more insight on what's happening or signals and stuff like that. It kind of happens quite often throughout the film, which I must admit, it grows a little tiresome, them just kind of continuing to do this, but whatever, the film still works. So part 2, titled The Curve, begins the next morning by showing us a view of Earth from space, where we can see the curvature of the Earth and a satellite floating through orbit. Rose wakes Amanda because the internet went out before she was able to finish the Friends season finale, and that is this kid's main obsession throughout the movie. And later in the backyard, she sees a herd of deer just staring at her, and she just stares back at them. And the deer represent how the world is just rapidly changing in ways humans can't predict or understand. And that's info from the book because your boy did a little research. During this time, Clay leaves to head into town to see if he can gather more information about what's happening. And George, his daughter Ruth, and Amanda further speculate about the events in the kitchen. Amanda tells them about a news alert on her phone about hackers, so I guess overnight, some sort of signal may have went through. And George seems to once again be a little bothered by the news, as if he kind of knows something's coming. He later drives to a neighbor's house for help, and in this moment we find out that he's been texting his wife Maya, but his messages aren't going through. The phones are out, so she could still be alive, but who knows. Then we cut back to Clay, who just looks lost. He jumps out of the car and fails to get a cell phone signal. But during this time, there's a faint news chatter on the car radio, but he misses it. Because as I've already told you guys, everyone misses all the damn broadcast in this movie. Back at the house, the Sanford kids, Rose and Archie, head into the woods to investigate the deer that Rose saw, because she feels like the deer was trying to tell them something. So at this point, all 3 events play out simultaneously. George finds an empty neighbor's house, but he finds a satellite phone that also has no signal, which at this point means that there is no way to contact anyone remotely. Then out on the road, Clay comes across a frantic Spanish-speaking woman. He obviously wants to help, but he doesn't understand what the hell she's saying. Shit, she could have been yelling for him to please unlock the door so she could cut his nuts off. I mean, hey, you gotta be careful out here. So back at the house in the woods, the siblings discover a shed where someone's been sleeping not far from the house. And that's just creepy as hell in general, if we're being honest. And that's exactly what they do in this moment by having the older brother scare his little sister with the idea that whoever has been sleeping in the shed has probably been watching her through the window at night, because there's a clear view of the house from the shed. And yep, that's what siblings are for. And back on the road with Clay, he leaves the woman in the road and runs across a huge drone that's just dropping thousands of red flyers while he's racing to get away from it. And back at the neighbor's house with George, he goes ahead and stores the satellite phone in the car just in case, and he continues to investigate around their home. And he discovers that a plane crashed behind their house on the beach, and there are just dead passengers scattered everywhere throughout the beach. Then to make matters worse, another damn plane comes crashing in, basically in the same damn spot, causing George to have to flee the scene, which is just a horrifying situation to be in. So after all of this, George, Clay, and the siblings return back to the house, and for some strange reason, no one really talks about what they experienced while they were away. George only really tells Amanda about the plane, and later his daughter, just because she finds out. Clay only tells Ruth about the Spanish-speaking woman on the road, and I don't think the kids say anything about the shed to anyone. Also around this time, everyone starts hearing loud booms in the distance, like bombs are going off, followed by a loud, unbearable screeching sound. And this is around where part 3, titled The Noise, goes into full effect. Also, it's kind of implied that everyone everywhere heard the noise. After this, Clay returns with one of the flyers, and his son Archie reveals that the symbol on the flyer means Death to America. The Sanford family now seem convinced that things are bad, like really bad, and they need to get the hell out of there and get back on the road. But George tries to convince them that it's safer for them to stay, but they are very adamant about leaving. After getting on the road, they come to find out that the highway is blocked by a long line of crashed Teslas, and Amanda notices that the Teslas are all brand new with the dealership papers still stuck to the damn windows, meaning that they all drove themselves off the lot and they were basically hacked during this big cyber attack. And in this moment, Amanda looks up the road and spots another Tesla heading their way. She runs to the car and the Sanford family just starts ducking and dodging Model 3s left and right. And in this moment, I felt a little Maximum Overdrive nostalgia. I mean, wouldn't it be a good time to have a Maximum Overdrive reboot? I mean, with all these computer controlled cars and shit, it just seems like a great time to do that. But I don't know, you guys tell me what you think about that. Once they see that they are unable to leave, the Sanford family returns to the Scott's house and we enter part 4, which is called The Flood, where they tried to plan their next course of action and Rose is still caught up on not being able to complete the damn Friends series finale, and Archie is trying to bust nuts to secret photos he snapped of Ruth, but he gives up and calls it a night because, well, you know, it's kind of hard to focus on something like that when the world is falling apart. So a little time passes and Clay and Ruth are getting their bonding time in, I guess. And George and Amanda are actually getting along. Or rather, Amanda is now deciding to no longer be a bigot. But George begins to inform her about how one of his powerful clients basically warned him in a cryptic kind of way that something bad was about to happen. He starts talking about some Illuminati powerful secret group of people type shit and how they aren't the ones behind it and how no one is in control. And the whole vibe just becomes ominous once again. See, George comes off like he's just joking, but at the same time, you can tell he's worried that all of this might actually be real. It seems to me like he's waiting to confirm something that he already knows, but he just hasn't received enough information yet, which I think is a fair way to go about the situation. It seems like the man knows more than everyone else and is staying calm and cool until he has seen more signs of confirmation. And also, I gotta mention this. Archie ain't shit in this movie in terms of supporting his sister. Like when she tries to have a heart-to-heart with him or looks for a glimmer of hope from her big brother, dude is just hopeless and just pisses on any hope this poor girl might have. And it was funny, but dude ain't shit. Later by the pool of flamboyance, of flamingos land in the pool. And yeah, I had to look up what the hell a group of flamingos were called. And it's just weird, but this is just another symbol throughout the film that no one is in control. And also we get to see Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali jam into Too Close. And yep, that was fun to watch. Honestly, I feel like this scene was mostly improvised. I just feel like Julia Roberts just started wiggling and doing random shit with her hands and the director was just like, yeah, keep going. I think I smell an Oscar. Later, that weird screeching noise happens again and knocks out the power and starts causing the windows and other glass to crack. And the next morning, Archie's teeth just start mysteriously falling out of his head and we enter the final chapter, which is named after the final episode of Friends called The Last One. Also, Rose has gone missing and no one knows where she is. And she also made a little speech the night before in the bed with her family about how she's tired of waiting on something. So yeah, there's a hint. So Amanda and Ruth team up to try to find Rose, and George, Clay, and Archie head over to Doomsday Kevin Bacon's house in search of medicine to keep Archie's teeth from falling out, because they feel like he's well prepared for an event like this since he's got so much shit stocked up. And also, I'm very curious about what the hell they're going to try to give him, because like, what the hell are you going to take to try to keep your teeth from falling out? If that kind of medicine exists, well, we'd be taking it right now, right? So they arrive and Doomsday Kevin Bacon tells them that it must have something to do with the noise. He tells them about an event that happened in Cuba where some kind of microwave weapons were used to send radiation through sound and it caused some people to lose their teeth. He also tells George and Clay he thinks it's a war because Russia recalled their staff from Washington. So George is like, yeah, I hear all that shit, but he begins to insist that Doomsday Kevin Bacon should help Clay's son. But he's like, hell nah, because it ain't his problem. The conversation gets heated and they end up holding each other at gunpoint. But during this time, after they find the shed, Ruth ends up getting surrounded by the herd of deer. But luckily, her and Amanda are able to scare them away. And luckily, George and Clay are eventually able to get the medicine from Danny, aka Doomsday Kevin Bacon. They don't really show how the situation gets resolved. I guess George just calls Kevin Bacon's bluff and he's able to give them the medicine. And really, in this moment, Clay is pretty useless during all of this and even owns up to basically being a wimp who's trying to save his son. And yeah, it was kind of pitiful. Like, you have another man fighting harder for your son than you are. After all of that, Clay later shows Doomsday Doomsday Kevin Bacon, the Iranian flyer, and he tells them that he spoke to a friend before the phones went out who also had a flyer as well. And he said that his flyer was in Mandarin, and he basically says that maybe they're all teaming up against the US since his friend had a different flyer. And the most unsettling part about all of this is that afterwards, George tells Clay about a 3-stage maneuver program he came across studying military campaigns. He tells Clay that this campaign terrified one of his clients because it could topple a country's government from within. He tells him the 3 stages, with the first stage being isolation, to disable their communication and transportation to make the target deaf, dumb, and paralyzed. Then he tells them that the second stage is synchronized chaos, to terrorize the target with covert attacks and misinformation to overwhelm them, and to basically make people start to turn on each other. And then the third stage, which is civil war, meaning that the previous steps would lead to complete chaos and everyone trying to kill each other. Towards the end, Amanda and Ruth stare over at New York through the trees, and they can see buildings exploding and they hear guns going off, and basically it's just the sound of everyone killing each other. And it's a pretty cool pan effect that happens from Amanda and Ruth to the view of the city above the trees, and then back down to a neighboring house where Rose is, where she's just stuffing her damn face. And this is also where she finally finds the final episode of Friends on DVD. And that's literally the way the movie ends. But we also know that Ruth will be found, because that's the house where George suggested to Clay that they should go to for safety because it has the underground bunker. And they got this information from Doomsday Kevin Bacon. And the reason for my theory, why I say Leave the World Behind is secretly a horror film, is because it basically has all the right ingredients. See, a horror movie typically includes elements like suspense, fear, supernatural or psychological threats, and an eerie atmosphere, unexpected twists, and often involves elements like darkness and the unknown to evoke a sense of dread in the audience. In this movie, there's a fear throughout the film that haunts the characters, and it's the fear of the unknown and the fact that they don't know what's happening. I mean, it could be a war, that's a possibility, but then how do you explain the strange events like the deer and the flamingos? And then the threat could be something otherworldly for all we know, like aliens or some shit. Like, the possibilities are kind of out there a bit. They're all worried that they might not survive impending events, and we see several people who have already died and limbs everywhere, planes crashing and people mysteriously getting sick, ominous music, and a strong presence of psychological terror. See, you don't have to have jump scares or a killer creeping around in the dark for a film to be a horror movie. For a lot of people, the events that occurred in this film might be their worst nightmare. But see, that's one of the things a lot of people will miss about this movie, because a lot of the horror elements are sort of hidden underneath several layers of social commentary and confusion, so it's kind of easy to miss. But if you start to pick the film apart, a lot of the stuff in the foreground and up front in the audience's face is about how people would deal with an apocalyptic event if it ever happened realistically. But there's a lot of horror underneath all of that. And honestly, it would be pretty terrifying to witness complete chaos like this if it ever happened. But either way, let me know what you guys thought about the film and if you agree or disagree with my theory. And until next time, thanks for watching.